So this is the sensor, and the sensor is super kind of sensitive to the value. Okay, so just to give you the idea, this is 98 lux right now, and as soon as I put actually my finger above, it drops actually to 10 lux. Okay, so this gives you the sense that as soon as you actually expose the sensor to the light or not, really you can see the difference. So typically what we do, well, we can do a couple of things. We do a kind of a survey of a room. So we basically take a room like this, we separate in grids, and then we go around paying attention not to shade of the sensor, and we take the measurements of the luminance spot by spot on a grid. Good thing of this approach is simple. With these ones, you basically need to record by hands because they don't have capability to record the data. The problem is, because you're measuring daylighting levels, you go back 5 minutes later, and you may probably find a different value. Okay? So you need to have a longitudinal study repeated in several seasons to get a sense for different time of what actually luminance level, that window, that building design, that kind of internal feature will look like.
Especially on a cloudy day, it can change extremely fast.
Okay, so that's actually one element that we are trying to look at. Okay, the second element of the next 30 minutes is basically having you playing with these kind of things for getting you a sense of what it really means 100 lux, what means 200 lux, what means 300 lux. If I need to tell you the truth, there's no way you really will be able to look at it. Like if I really tell you, okay, look at that desk, and tell me if you find 200 lux, 300 lux, it's really hard. Even for people used to do this kind of test, to anticipate what the luminance level on a desk will be. Okay? But one of the things you may probably be interested, if you try to take this sensor and put very close to the window, you easily will find 1,000 lux right now. Okay? And somebody has to go there and check. But then you actually can see how it degrades as soon as you enter into the room. So you see the sense of how it is for the luminance level.
Very important. Keep it away as far as possible from your body. Yeah?
Yeah, it's always easy in that second, third year.
So not necessary to write it down, we will document. That's good. And come closer now. Let's see, is there a big difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost double.
Yeah. You see just the
400 and closer to window 800.
Yeah, that's exactly what we expect. Put it to a window in the middle of the room and easily you find 1,000 lux. Okay? Which is way more than you really need typically. Yeah, well, 800, 900, 1,000. It's really hard to kind of look at the difference at that point. It's way above what your eye requires, and what's actually happening is that your eye will start closed. So in reality, it's just a matter of adaptation of your eye.
So basically what you're saying is that the difference between what we see here on the table and what's beside the window, there's 8 times more light.
There's 8 times more energy of light.
Light energy than here.
can be even more.
But like if we turn it, like if we tilt it.
Yeah, exactly. That's another problem of the luminance. A lot of people do not really trust the luminance levels. Although it's the only metric you will find in the standard and goes back to an UK old policy that I can actually speak about. The reality is the luminance is typically plotted on an horizontal surface. Okay? But we really don't do anything on a horizontal surface beyond actually writing. But even these days, nobody's writing. Everybody's typing on a computer. So the reality is that the vision these days is really vertical. So you see other people on a vertical surface. You type on a screen that is vertical. You read on a screen that is vertical.
Unless you're on a mobile phone, because then you hunch down like this.
Well, so we're going back to that more. But the reality is really like setting policies and codes according to the horizontal luminance level really doesn't have any value these days that we do everything vertically. Okay? So we do it based on contrast. But then the standards have been designed for a luminance level. And the reason why it's been designed for a luminance level is because the daylighting factor method that you actually learned this morning, it's very simple in order to shape windows. So somehow we like actually the luminance on a horizontal surface because we like the idea that we can understand what kind of size the window should have. And we pretend to know that if we know the window, then we know how much actually light I get into the room. Which is clearly not the case, because a window oriented on a north or south or east or west is going to have a completely different kind of illuminance at the end.
And depending upon the location as well.
Yeah, location, latitude, you know,
neighbor,
Yeah, and then
all things that the
local
daylighting
environmental
factor
factors.
method doesn't consider.
Yeah.
So if you do the daylighting factor method, you don't consider really all these kind of things.
What you should consider if you want to do it right, and we really failed once, consider the neighbor buildings. You can use it as a simple, don't know, body like this. But to see, okay, my neighbor building is 8 meters tall, it's in a distance of 5 meters, then you should consider it because it makes a huge difference. Yeah?
And also the color of the surface. So for example, this
Oh yes,
neighboring
oh
building
yes,
here-
oh yes, you're right, that makes a big
Yeah,
difference.
so I mean,
yes.
it's a silver building, so it's reflecting obviously a lot of daylight back into this room.
Yeah.
But if that surface was black, then it
That
wouldn't.
was-
And that would also have,
There's a funny story in Austria. Once a client bought the neighbor the new painting in white. Both were happy, so it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of stories about the egg building in London, the building that was cooking eggs for the neighbors. And these days there are, with the kind of monetization of all the cities, so all the
London
cities,
Marine Authority building, is it that one?
the egg building in London, I don't know who is the owner, but basically what happened, there was a building that was reflecting a lot of light to the neighbors, which is interesting enough because this building had a concave surface, and so wasn't actually only reflective, it was also focalizing in one point. So there was the famous car that melted under the sun in the middle of August because a lot of light was reflected back into the room. And these days, we are expecting a lot more of this phenomenon because in order to cool down buildings, a lot of companies are coming out with a lot of coatings and paints that are highly reflective, albedo, those kind of white roof that you keep seeing everywhere. And they do a good job for the building where they are, but they also reflect the entire energy back to the opposite building. So clearly this starts creating some issues. Is this really something a building should do? Like, that building, it's reflecting everything back towards us. Fair enough. It's probably the same owner, it's university. So at the end of the day, you can only complain with the mirror. But if this wasn't really the case, is this something that I should accept, that I get an extra kind of cooling demand load just because that building has decided to reflect back towards me all the energy that is running from the sun? So this is kind of a policy issue. But to give you the sense, these are typically used to have a check. Okay, so you go into a classroom and you want to check if the windows in this room are okay, or you want to check if the light bulbs that you have actually mounted on the ceiling are still enough good. Because you also need to understand that those bulbs tend to deteriorate with the time. So people go typically with the lux meter, do a check of the luminance level into the room. The lamp is still actually emitting what it was supposed to, then the lamp is okay, otherwise you replace the lamp periodically. So you remember those kind of lamps that gets old and they start actually flickering and start actually losing power output. So with these kind of things, it's pretty easy and straightforward to check if
But
the
you're
lighting
referring
lamps.
more to fluorescent lighting, right? Or are you also referring to LEDs?
Any lamp actually really lose kind of output with the time. Incandescent lamps or any halogen lamps typically loses power because there is a deposit of black coat on the bulb. So the old lamps, they started being black. And when they really burned, they were completely black. Fluorescent lamps actually, they lose power because some gases, that is the fluorescent gas that is in the bulb, typically tend to diffuse out. So they basically start flickering at one point. When the tube is completely old, you turn on and you need to wait 5 seconds because the ballast doesn't really work, probably because it doesn't find the pressure of the gas. And it also actually start flickering and it start not being stable. The LED are also pretty kind of losing a lot of cells because most of the LED lamps are a series of circuits. So there are a lot of lamps and they periodically fail one or the other. So the output gets actually reduced with time. So you come in a room with this and you get a sense of it, okay? So what are we going to do is, like, in group of 3, 4, let's actually take one and let's see around, almost as a game, if you can anticipate what amount of luminance level is going to happen in a room. To give you actually an idea of reference, if you think you can read and write, that's probably going to be at least 200 lux, okay? So as soon as you start moving through the corridor and you start realizing that, oh, probably here I will turn on the light if I have to write or read, that's probably a good sign that the luminance level is way below 100 lux. because you're a young person, so at 100 lux you will still be able to write or read for a short amount of time. So for half an hour you will be okay. You do it for 8 hours, you get super tired. Okay? But even with a 100 lux, which is basically, you see right now there is 120 lux. And here you can probably write. And you will not turn on the lights. Okay? But then if you do it for 8 hours straight, day after day after day, that will probably be not enough. Okay?
There was one comment that there is a difference between those. You see 130, and it doesn't really matter. If it's 15 lux more or less, it's just to give you an idea. Is it 100 lux, 200 lux? If it's 200 or 220, it doesn't matter. But just to get a rough idea, okay, where do I end up? And as you said, the benchmark is at least 100 lux.
I mean, differences may be due to at least 3 different things. Number one, there is a sensor. Every single time there is a sensor, there is an error. That is how accurate is the sensor.
So let's go back to the project work. So they're designing homes.
Okay.
So what levels should they be looking at for the different rooms,
Yeah.
for example? Because they're also doing, some people are also doing mixed generational homes. So this is actually very good information for the people who are considering that. So they need to take into account the needs of older people and younger people.
You know, the typical approach is 300 lux is what you want for 8 hours a day to do tasks that are middle kind of demanding in terms of the attitude of your brain. So if you're just writing or, you know, having conversation or you're just actually having lunch, 300 lux is probably your target. What you then do is you start putting task lights on those specific surfaces where you do extra activities. So your kitchen, where you prepare food and you have a big knives cutting the meat, probably will have a little extra lamp to target 500 lux. Your bathroom or your dresser, where you want to kind of pay attention exactly to your hair or any other specific task, will have a specific task light to target 500-600 lux. Things such as your bedroom may have your kind of place to read, and that's another spot where you can easily find 400 or 500 lux.
Right, so then the other idea is to not only think about the artificial lighting, but to see how and when you can incorporate daylighting also for these tasks, I think, as well.
Yeah. So, and I mean, this is the goal. Now, different story is how do you achieve this goal? Ideally, in a perfect world, Velux will tell you clearly, fully 100% of the time with Windows. And actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so
we really insist on this because it's easy to get the bright room darker.
Yeah.
That's easy. You take a blind and you can easily adjust it. But if the room is dull, how to improve it? You can just switch on lights where you have not the same quality of light. So therefore I would go, of course, always in balance with not overheating to 500, 600 lux if possible, and then adjust it with blinds.
And to give you the sense of what that means from a design point of view, to get 300 lux on average, so like averaging northeast, west, northeast, west, and south, you typically need to have 1/7 of the surface that you have on the floor put on the window. In other words, if this actually room is 30 square meter, you typically need up to 4 meters of windows to achieve on average 300 lux at our latitude. Okay? The more you move north, the more than 1/7 has to be bigger, so 1/6. The more you move towards the equator, the 1/7 has to become 1/8, 1/9, and then you get actually 200 lux. Okay? This is basically rule of thumb to get a sense of how big should be the windows. Now, clearly this is from the window size, then different stories where should I position in my window? Because I can decide to put the window closer to a corner and actually make sure that I got a very highly reflective surface on the wall, and in that way my window will have an impact on one surface but also as a reflection on the other surface. Reversely, I can have the window put in the middle of the room, but then if this room is super big, then I don't get actually the advantage of the reflection on the lateral walls. So I get actually that corners into those kind of spots. So it also depends on your room. So going back to your question, if they're going to design with rooms that are, I would say, average dimensions, so something like in the range of 20 meters maximum, then probably the window that they're going to target is always going to be in the range of 3 to 4 meters, which basically means 1.2 by 2, or, you know, like 2 meters by 1.5 if you want actually a balcony, if you want a window, whatever you're going to move.
But I think you've already started to see a little bit of this from the daylighting that you were looking at in the simulation yesterday, probably in the day before. You know, you started to see these patterns on the floor, and somebody asked me, what does this mean? Well, now I think that you have an idea. In the simulation, what they try to do is to show you through color. So, you know, obviously when you have more light, then it becomes much, much brighter. And then when you have a darker color, it means that you have less sort of.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to this and what we actually have seen yesterday, one of the things that really then enters into the, I would say, artistic side of the daylighting design. We can do the discussion in terms of functionality. The 300, that's okay, don't worry. Question arrow is your button. I mean, we can do the work in terms of functionality, so you target the 300 lux, and then when you want to add more for whatever reason, you can actually target a bit more. It's a corridor, I want to stay with 100, 200 lux, fair enough, it's a corridor, nothing challenging is happening over there. But then clearly the daylighting as the opposite side, I would say the complementary side, is that you need to give a texture and a feeling to the person living in the room. And that kind of feeling cannot really be satisfied by just looking at the quantity of the illuminance, so the 300 lux needs to be satisfied by the quality of the lighting that you're bringing in. So things such as people, depending on the age, the Baroque style, often actually brought the light really close to the surface to kind of make the texture of the surface to emerge. And so they actually create the three-dimensional side of the walls, okay? Like modern style, always like really flat surface, so the windows always goes into the center, so the surface gets flat, and I don't see actually the roughness of the wall. So there are a lot of actually techniques to kind of really give quality to the lighting you bring into the room, and it's not just a quantity issue often.
They don't take into account the spectrum of light that's coming through, do they?
No, so these are actually absolute energy quantities, so they are watt, and they don't really care if that watt is running in the range of 500 nanometers, so green, or 300 nanometers, so yellow. They don't care about that. Right? That's actually an energy metric. So that's actually is an inverse of a PV panel. Okay? Think about the PV panel. The PV panel takes a photo, transforms into actually the silicium junction into electricity. It doesn't care if it is a yellow light or it is reddish light. Okay? But you know that's actually because you want to just know about that, about the energy. Now, typically, because we often receive only energy
We
from
have to make a pause here. So groups 3 and 4 need to get ready, and you're ready to go to the lighting lab. So please take your model and get ready for the next tutors.
And then if it's a matter of quality over quantity of light, should that be factored in at some stage? Or?
It depends. You know, it depends. There are a lot.
What you can do is you make an aberration with overcast sky, and then you make a simulation, for example, a sunny day in December, in March, in June. And then you see the quality. How is the sun moving? How is it looking? And also, what I told you, you find maybe that I can do it. You say, okay, is that too dark?
If it is actually the window, then you either have daylight outside or some kind of spatial coding on the glass, but that's going to be a fixed way to filter the light. So you put actually blue window because for whatever reason you like actually the blue feeling in your building. That's going to be fixed.